oh, the rules say we can have 3 more players. We're going to have 3 more players. Well, in 2013, 5 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court changed the rules of our elections, gutting the 1965 Voting Rights Act. This was the Shelby County decision in 2013. They ruled over the loud objections of the liberal justices that it was just fine to gerrymander based on race, based on politics. If you're going to do race, you have to have a little fig leaf, but, wink, wink, nod, nod. It's just fine to throw millions of voters off the rolls, again, based on race or where they live. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, throwing out preclearance when it's worked and continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. She's absolutely right. This was followed by 2 other corrupt all-Republican decisions, Rucho versus Common Cause and Alexander versus NAACP, that expanded the ability of states to gerrymander and consolidate their politics. And then in 2018, there was the Husted versus A. Philip Randolph Institute decision that made it easy for states to target voters with postcards that look like junk mail and throw them off the voting rolls if they fail to return them. As a result of this rapid-fire series of 5 Republican-only Supreme Court decisions, Republican-controlled states, red states, have passed hundreds of laws making it harder to register to vote, particularly for poor, black, female, disabled, and elderly voters. They have thrown just last year, 4.2 million mostly Democratic voters off the rolls or refused to count their votes, leading, as Greg Palast told you on this program just a couple of weeks ago, to the 2024 election of Donald Trump and Republicans winning control of the House and Senate. And they have gerrymandered their states even more heavily and surgically to give Republicans a solid hold on both the House of Representatives and multiple state legislators. Democratically controlled states, meanwhile, have done nothing. Actually, the democratically controlled states, the blue states, have done worse than nothing, citing fairness and the way it should be done. They've stopped gerrymandering altogether, which is nuts, right? But yeah, that's what they did. California in 2008 passed a resolution to end gerrymandering there. There have been, right now, there are similar proposals in Arizona, Colorado, Michigan, and Virginia to end gerrymandering in democratically controlled states. What will that do? Probably turn them over to Republicans. If California, and by the way, gerrymandering, here's a great example, North Carolina. North Carolina is a 50-50 state. Year after year after year, they elect a Democrat as their governor. So in statewide elections, Democrats can win in North Carolina. But they have 13 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. 10 of those 13 seats are held by Republicans. Why? Gerrymandering. The same is true of Alabama, Florida, Texas, Georgia, Louisiana, Ohio, and Utah, which provide 7 additional seats for Republicans in the House of Representatives. If just North Carolina had not been gerrymandered, Democrats would control the House right now. If California had, instead of saying no gerrymander, if California had gerrymandered or aggressively increased their gerrymander, Democrats would control the House of Representatives right now. I mean, but that's just the beginning. Another strategy to suppress the vote is strict signature matching on mail-in ballots. The GOP last year rolled out a program to field an army of 50,000 poll watchers, including interviewing candidates from white supremacist militia groups, who challenged the signatures of mail-in voters in blue cities. And then there's the voter roll purges. In multiple Republican states, particularly Georgia, Ohio, Florida, and Texas, they mail out postcards into urban areas to purge people from voting rolls. The postcard looks like junk mail. If you don't send it back, you get purged from the voting roll. It was Ohio, by the way, that took that case to the Supreme Court, the Husted case. And that's because purging voters has become a very successful thing for Republicans. Here's a quote from a Demos report. Between the close of registration for the 2020 general election and the close of registration for the 2022 general election, States reported removing 19,260,000 records from their voter registration rolls. That's equivalent to 8.5% of the total number of voters who were registered in the United States. Another 17 million were purged in the 2 years leading up to the 2018 election. Remember George W. Bush's 537-vote victory in Florida in 2000? Well, that was just 3 months after Jeb Bush and Katherine Harris had purged 90,000 black people from the voting rolls in Florida because there were felons in Texas who had similar names. More recently, the Brennan Center found that just between 2014 and 2016, the 2 years leading up to the Hillary-Trump election, over 14 million people were purged from voting rolls, mostly in Republican-controlled states. I mean, this is crazy. It's time for Democrats to start fighting back. Democrats, instead of ending gerrymanders, need to start gerrymandering. Democratic states should start mailing postcards into largely Republican, red areas. And if the postcards don't get returned, purge them from the damn voting roll. Democratic election judges in Republican areas should start challenging signatures. Now, none of these things that I just said Democrats should do are fair, but they are all legal. This is called fighting fire with fire. And if Democrats did these things, what would happen? Republicans would start squealing like stuck pigs, which, by the way, Democrats should have been doing for the past 20 years, but didn't. But when Republicans start squealing, guess what? Things change. Now, it's not a certainty, but I think it's a likelihood that Republicans might even say, okay, you guys are winning at this game now, let's quit playing the game. Let's just go back to letting everybody vote. If we don't, if Democrats don't start doing this stuff, get ready for Democrats to lose the 2026 and 2028 elections. And this doesn't even begin to touch Citizens United, which is really a whole different rant. Stick around. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
17 minutes past the hour. Are Democrats bringing a teaspoon to a gunfight? I'll tell you about that right after this. And welcome back. Bob in University Place, Washington. Hey, Bob, thanks for listening to KBCS. What's up?
You bet, Tom. Good morning. I would like to share with you and your audience when the next day of 5051 protests are scheduled.
Cool. Go for it.
That'd be March 4th. And to find, pardon me?
I said much better. That's next week.
Yeah. And to find out more information, people can go to their website, which is 5050.1. And it's all spelled out, so it's FIFTY.ONE.
Right.
Okay. And I appreciate you putting the word out there, because it seems to me that the only way we're going to get the mainstream media to pay attention is if we get so many people out there that they can't not pay attention.
Completely agree, Bob. Thank you so much for sharing that and for putting it out. And you're absolutely right. 5051 and indivisible.org are both just doing an absolute great job. They're out there taking names and kicking ass, and we need to expand it, if anything. Thank you, Bob. Roger in Seattle, also in Seattle, or in Seattle area. Hey, Roger, what's on your mind today?
Also a KBCS listener.
Yep, there you go.
And supporter. I have three topics. Any of three, I'd be happy to hear your comments on.
Please pick one. We ask listeners, as out of respect for other people who are on hold, to only talk about one thing per call.
Okay, well, let's start with the favorite migrant publicity term from Be Best. How about how to be the best president? Okay, well, one of the things is, do you want to have a legacy or do you want to do it fast? So if Trump wants to do it fast, he hires Elon Musk, and he does the Welch thing of slash and burn, like we
Jack
do in
Welch from GE, or Al Dunlop, chainsaw Al Dunlop at Sunbeam.
So, and he's going to go down in history of being the Nixon Harding combination, because
I don't think Trump cares.
Well, it's
as long
not
as he's
the
making
best
money.
president then. He's in there with Harding and Nixon then, down at the bottom.
Oh, I think he's going to be down there with Hoover. I think he's going to provoke the next Great Depression.
Oh, I think Harding's below Hoover.
Harding what?
Harding is below Hoover because he had the oil Teapot Dome oil scandal.
That was during Coolidge's presidency.
All the other grifters that
was Calvin Coolidge.
No, it was Harding. That's from my 8th grade history class.
Oh, really? I thought for sure that was Coolidge. Are you well, maybe it got resolved during Coolidge's administration. Well, in any case, it doesn't. It was the 1920s.
Harding died.
Yeah. Okay.
And then anyway, so I think Trump is going to compete with Harding to see how many of his cabinet people go to court, because Gorsuch is the daughter. Gorsuch's Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch's Ann Gorsuch's son,
right?
And Gorsuch, of course, had a lot of legal problems after she got.
Well, she had to resign as the administrator of the EPA to avoid prosecution. I mean, it was pretty bad. She resigned in the midst of a scandal. Yeah, I'm with you, Roger. Roger, thank you. Thanks for pointing all that out. That was great. It is 21 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew both took cash bribes while they were in the White House. Since then, the Supreme Court, or at least 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court, made it a lot easier for politicians to take bribes with their Citizens United decision, which basically legalized political bribery as long as it's done through campaigns or PACs or super PACs. But for some people, there's just never enough money, right? Donald Trump has been running small-time hustles to make money for decades, selling sneakers, Bibles, steaks, vodka, water. But now he's hit the big time. He's got these fungible tokens, right? These fungible crypto assets, which are basically just digital pictures of Donald Trump that say fight, fight, fight. And he has turned them into an $8 billion machine. His wife is in on this too, with his Trump coin. It's a new way that foreign powers and billionaires in the United States can just shovel money into Donald Trump's pocket. There's a whole article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled Presidential Payola, The Evolution of Political Bribery. Check it out.
In the game of politics, the field's not level. One side's playing dirty, dancing with the devil. Gerrymanders purges, they stack the deck, while the other side plays fair, earns respect. Should Democrats rig the vote, change the game? Fight fire with fire, shed the shame. When justice is blinded and rules are bent, is it time for a new precedent? Courts have spoken, open the door for tactics that we all abhor. One team embraces the loopholes found, the other stands on moral ground. Should Democrats rig the vote, change the game? Fight fire with fire, shed the shame.
Yes, I think they should. I think they absolutely should. All right, congressional Democrats have hit an all-time low in approval ratings. Why? Because they're not friggin' speaking out. Did you catch last night on Rachel Maddow's program, Hakeem Jeffries, the House leader of the Democrats? She was like, how tough can you guys be? Do you need steel in your spine? And he's like, we got plenty of steel in our spine. We're going to be tough. And then he said nothing. I mean, it was gibberish. It was just complete gibberish. As he's waving his hands around, he's like trying to build a Lego house in front of him while he's talking. The guy's got to have some kind of neurological disorder. I don't know what it is, but I've never seen anything like it. The old joke about Italians like to talk with their hands. This is way beyond that. Hakeem Jeffries may be a wonderful man. I've never met him. I don't know him. He's never been on this program. He might be a brilliant tactician. He might be great at doing the backroom stuff. Let him do all that stuff. But Democrats need an actual damn leader in the House of Representatives. And, put him in line to be Speaker of the House if that's the way to do it. But pick somebody else to be your spokesperson. Anand Giridharadas was on MSNBC this morning on Morning Joe, and he was talking about this. He says, America's right now living through a hostile takeover by billionaires and bullies, and we don't have an opposition that's able to simply, clearly, and starkly say that. Which is exactly what I saw last night on MSNBC. I was, after we watched that, I turned to Louise and I said, we're screwed. I used a little stronger word. He says, Giridharadas says, I don't think any American watching that interview with Leader Jeffries would come away feeling defended deep in their heart in the middle of an autocratic takeover. It was full of legal terms, as it relates to, in terms of. No, we don't feel the need for more steel in our spine. He said, defensiveness and self-protection do not make an opposition. What did Hakeem Jeffries, what has he said historically? Well, if you Google Hakeem Jeffries, talking about politics, he once compared Democrats to Aaron Judge, the New York Yankees player. He said he waits for the right one, and then he swings. We're not going to swing at every pitch. We're going to swing at the ones that matter for the American people. And then later he said at another press briefing, this is Jeffries, I'm going to try to figure out what leverage we actually have. What leverage do we have? Republicans have repeatedly lectured America. They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government. Say what? Bernie Sanders is out there taking names and kicking ass, traveling around the Midwest, drawing huge crowds. Why isn't every Democrat in the House and Senate doing this? Where the hell are they? Chuck Schumer. Oh, let me drop my glasses down over my nose and read you another boring speech. These are our two leaders, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. Why are they not out in front of the microphones every day? Why are they not out there getting arrested in front of these buildings? Why are they not taking a security detail into the Treasury Department to kick out the Doge people? What the hell is going on, Democrats?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
27 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls and more of the news of the day right after this break. The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence by Michael D'Antonio. This is from the first chapter. For decades, Pence had presented himself as a humble servant who could be entrusted with power because he was at heart a mild-mannered Midwesterner. Friends and foes alike said his major character trait was extreme niceness. When given the opportunity, Pence described himself as a true Hoosier, son of Indiana, who was a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. This is how he had introduced himself to the country at the Republican National Convention 6 months earlier. The list contrasted with the usual pledge politicians make to put country first. This is what President Obama did after the 2016 election when he said, "We are not Democrats first, we are not Republicans first, we are Americans first." The vice president's self-declared identity revealed both his priorities and the source of his power. For 30 years, he had helped lead the Republican Party into a closer alliance with preachers who were turning evangelical Christianity from a religion into a political crusade that engaged in a culture war with non-believers. The aim of many was to destroy abortion rights, roll back the equality gained by gay citizens, and prepare the nation for the second coming of Christ. Pence and others used martial metaphors and considered themselves warriors of the Christian right, both besieged and called upon to fight. Quote, "Those who would have us ignore the battle being fought over life, marriage, and religious liberty have forgotten the lessons of history," said Pence in 2010. America's darkest moments have come when economic arguments trumped moral principles. Pence's allies in his war included hugely wealthy donors who, despite their vast wealth accumulated at a time of historic inequality, also posed as victims. As libertarians in the mold of Ayn Rand's cardboard characters, they felt inhibited in the pursuit of even greater riches by a government that imposed foolish regulations and would redistribute their wealth to the supposedly indolent poor. Starting with this perspective, they denied the science behind environmental protection, demanded tax cuts for themselves, and insisted on massive reductions in programs serving anyone who wasn't rich. The victimhood claimed by both the libertarians and the Christian right permitted the construction of an alternative reality that denied their own power and masked their ambition to make politics and culture conform to an ideology that included white Christian supremacy and predatory capitalism. It also denied the progress they had made in their construction of their own political might. With his oath of office, Vice President Pence became both the free marketer's hero and the most successful Christian supremacist in American history. Most of Pence's life had been preparation for this moment, and possibly one more. His lifelong goal, set when he was a boy, was the Oval Office itself. Remarkably, he had reached this point by tying his fate to Donald J. Trump, a man whose immorality in the form of lying, cheating, and deceiving in every aspect of his life, from his marriage to his businesses, had made him a living exemplar of everything that Christianity and conservatism abhorred. However, this record also suggested that Pence was more likely to assume the highest office in the land than most vice presidents who had come before. To put it bluntly, Trump was vulnerable to impeachment. If this occurred, Pence would see the hand of God at work in his elevation to the presidency. In the meantime, he would wait and watch. On Inauguration Day, with Pence looking on, a slightly stooped stepped forward when it was his turn to face the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts. Beside Trump stood his wife, Melania, the former fashion model, who held two Bibles, Lincoln's and Trump's own. At the stroke of noon, the president-elect raised his right hand and placed his left on the Bibles. As he did this, Trump's family members and hundreds of political and government figures strained to see the moment. Trump and Pence were a study in contrast. At age 58, Pence appeared trim, perhaps even athletic, and could have passed for a man 10 years younger. His jacket was neatly buttoned, his hands were clasped at his waist, and his smooth face was set in a half smile. Mere feet away, in sum, he resembled a small-town pastor, or maybe even a funeral director. Mere feet away, a stern-faced 70-year-old Trump stood with his coat hanging open like a caftan to reveal a long red necktie. Despite much cosmetic intervention, he looked old and tired. At the conclusion of the presidential oath, which had been voiced by 44 presidents before him, Trump said the words, "So help me God," and accepted the congratulations of those closest to him with a thin-lipped, toothless grin. He then delivered a 15-minute speech replete with distortions and falsehoods that were his trademark. He declared that America was awash with crime and despair and under constant attack. "This American carnage stops right here and stops right now," said Trump. It was the most remembered phrase of the address. That was some weird S-word, former President George W. Bush was heard to remark as he left the inaugural stand. Weird was the mildest word that one could attach to the 45th President of the United States as he launched an administration that would be stained by scandal and corruption so broad it defied a citizen's ability to grasp. Cronyism, secrecy, and nepotism would flourish. Presidential lies, daily cataloged by the Washington Post and others, would come at the rate of more than 150 per month. From the moment of his oath, Mike Pence, the vice president, faced the historic, some would say daunting, challenge of dealing with an erratic and undisciplined commander-in-chief. The book, The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
In the shadows of the Kremlin's might, a deal was struck beneath the night. whispers echo of a secret tie between the power and the spy. Does Putin own Trump? The question stands, a puppet dancing on Russian strands, in the corridors where secrets seep. The truth lies buried dark and deep. From Helsinki stage to whispered calls, a leader bends, another enthralls. Sanctions lifted, alliances frayed, a nation's trust begins to fade. Does Putin own Trump? The question
Yeah, I think so. I don't even think that's a question anymore. Yesterday, the United States voted with North Korea, Belarus, Russia, and Hungary to say, no, Russia didn't invade Ukraine, and it wasn't a terrible thing 3 years ago, and all those dead people and all those raped women and all those stolen children and all those destroyed cities and the ongoing daily bombing of this country, all of that doesn't even exist. Or if it does, it's Zelensky's fault. The United States has abandoned, officially abandoned, the position that we acquired as a result of winning World Wars I and II, particularly World War II. We were the leader of the free world. That was our more or less official, title. And now the United States is aligned with Russia. Now we're down with Putin. We're Putin's bitch, as the old saying goes. It is, or at least Donald Trump is, and he's dragging America with him. I literally never thought I would see this day in my lifetime. And I can't imagine what my father, who volunteered to fight in World War II, straight out of high school, would have said, or done for that matter, were he alive today and able to see this. Can you imagine the men who fought in World War II? And now we're aligning. I realize Russia was our ally in World War II, but Russia has become what Nazi Germany was. Can you imagine any of those people who fought in that war? If they were still alive, I realize there's a small handful of them who still are, but I'm lacking adjectives. Astonishing, horrible, disgusting, pathetic, screwed up, effed up. Anyhow, what's on your mind today? Let's pick up some calls here. CC in Northbrook, Illinois. Hey, CC, what's up?
Hi, Tom. These are not obstacles. They're opportunities. You are just fired me up. I am inspired by the people in government who are resigning from their jobs to uphold their oath. I'm just inspired. I've been checking the boxes as you've been, suggesting. I went to Indivisible, stood out on the protest line.
God bless you.
On the protest day, and went to my Democratic local DNC meeting. Of course, that didn't go over well. I was in the middle of the room arguing with the vice chair because I didn't want to put a sign in my yard, but that's fine. I was there. I called my senators and representatives, and man, you are inspiring me, brother. And but what I call you about, I want to resuscitate 2 words. One of the words is integrity. Donald Trump has just hit that one upside the head with a baseball bat, is laying down. It needs to be resuscitated. Integrity. That's what's going on in the government. People are resigning because they have integrity. And that fires me up. But then there's another word, stupid. And that word has a black eye. Kamala Harris gave it a black eye on Fox News. She should have responded, yes, they're stupid. Because ignorance Tom, I watched your show. I started at 11 o'clock. I probably don't stop watching it until 2. And, you know, in the beginning of the show, I'm ignorant. But at the end, I'm a little bit smarter. And that's the difference between being stupid and ignorant. Ignorant, you can learn. You can learn. You can be better. Stupid, you just stuck. And you get. Am I wrong?
Welcome to the GOP, CC. No, you're not.
Yes,
wrong.
they're stupid. They're not ignorant anymore. They're stupid. And so, Tom, I just want to keep encouraging you to keep doing what you're doing, man. You're firing us up out here. And by the way, something else I learned on your show. Politicians generally are not leaders, as we're seeing right now. They're not leaders. They find out where the crowd is going to run to the front. That conversation you had with Polkan last week, he just wasn't getting it. He's too stuck on these surveys. What you're trying to tell him is that, man, all these things you're talking about will be irrelevant once the country is taken over. It wasn't clicking with him, but you tried. You're a good man. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your work you're doing, and you're inspiring me.
Thank you, CC. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words and for your activism. I mean, you know, we all need to stand up and yeah, I second everything you said. CC, thank you so much. Win in Emden, Maine. Hey, Win, what's up?
Emden, Maine. Yeah, hi, Tom.
Hey.
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm going along with everything you're saying, and appreciate your salute to the World War II vets. I had 5 uncles in the Battle of the Bulge.
Whoa.
The last one just passed last year at 100 years of age.
God bless him.
So anyway, you're right. We need to get strategic here. And I just want to give you something to think about. Suppose we go undercover, every Democrat, or as many as we can get, to register as a Republican. Okay? And then perhaps we could threaten to primary the Republicans. We'll primary them. I mean, that's what Trump's threatening to do. Well, we could do the same thing. Okay? And if we all registered as Republicans, they wouldn't know who we are. They can't purge us. They'd be too scared. And another bright spot in doing that would be that give them false confidence. You know, all these people are becoming, they wouldn't know where to put their confidence.
Yeah.
And then we can impeach him too. With that, we also ought to do. We need to impeach Trump, whether we win or lose. But if we all kind of infiltrated and registered as Republicans, that would knock them crazy.
Yeah, the key phrase there, Win, is if we all. And as I'm sure you know, that ain't going to happen.
As many as we can.
I love the idea. About half our states, though, don't have closed primaries. In half the states, if you want to vote in the Republican primary, you don't have to register as a Republican. I mean, that's how, when I was living in Michigan back in the 60s, the Democrats ended up sending what was his name, the notorious racist, off to, as the Democratic candidate for president. And, it's... So, yeah, it happens. It does happen.
Register anyway.
Yeah, there you go. Win, thank you.
Register anyway.
I'm with you. I'm not going to do that. I want to stay inside the Democratic Party so that I can have a say in the Democratic Party and vote for progressives. But I get what you're saying, and if that works in Maine, go for it. Go for it. Keep thinking, Win. I like the way you think. Bob in Raisin, Texas. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Hey, Tom and listeners, happy Teen Tuesday here for the protests.
Tell me about it.
I just want to kind of echo the previous caller there. Says, by necessity, I'm essentially a registered Republican here. No, not registered, but Trump is sending me direct letters asking for money and contributing to a couple of times to his funds. I mean, it's letter from Trump and essentially, I'm independent, but I voted in the last Republican primary because I wanted to have somebody else other than a convicted felon in there.
So you have open primaries in Texas?
Right. Yeah,
cool.
We have open primaries, but I usually vote Democrat for the main election, but on the primaries, I do Republican to screen them out, screen out the baddies.
There you go.
Anyhow, just to echo that, essentially also by necessity, I'm outnumbered 1-7 here. I guess 7-1. When I post on an app like Nextdoor, they have certain guidelines, and you can only post political stuff typically during elections. But the last post I had a massive reaction. Again, 5 to 7-1, maybe against me, railing against me. Even though I had to tell these people, hey, I voted in the Republican primary, and I voted for somebody that wasn't a 37-time convicted felon and adjudicated rapist. And then the way to get through these guidelines, my suggestion is essentially to find out what your Nextdoor or the app guidelines are locally, and because they require it to be a local subject topic, and they require it to be a non-political topic, except during election time. Right. And I put out one that essentially said effectively for Ted Cruz locally here, a senator, essentially, go ahead and stay in Cancun, Ted. We're better off with all red. And man, that one stayed on there. It went through the Nextdoor guidelines and was able to stay on there. And lately, I posted one, essentially a copy of the Lincoln Project ad, where you thought you voted for Donald Trump, but you really voted for Elon Musk
or Vladimir Putin. Yeah.
And that one got rejected because it was political and again non-local.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that you could probably get through, for example, as opposed to writing something in the paper and getting a bunch of threats and whatever. Essentially, people that are also resorting to being undercover, essentially do the same thing with your local reps, and essentially online, Nextdoor app or whatever, request them to have a town meeting, which they're not having. They're not having town meetings here. Yep. My rep here locally in this district here, in our paper, our local paper, Victoria Advocate, said that he was working for his contributors, not his constituents.
Wow.
He actually stated that.
He came right out and said it. Holy cow. Yeah. And they elect him anyway.
And they elect him anyhow. They reelected him, to replace that crooked senator, representative that was in there before, who got kicked out. So, that was just a throwback.
So forgive my ignorance of Texas politics here, Bob, but you've got John Cornyn and Ted Cruz in the Senate. Are either one of them up for re-election next year?
No. Cornyn may be dropping out. I don't know, but I don't think they are. Okay. Ted Cruz just got back in.
Right. Yeah, that was the Colin Allred race.
Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah, and my feedback on that one again is to be able to punch through on your local people. I mean, I'm talking directly with my neighbors here in a very small area, but it covers our general area and our district. I suggest if you want to get on those apps and get punched through the guidelines where they're not blocked or rejected or banned even, is to make it a local thing and say if it's going to affect everyone in your area.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead and put out something like, hey, where can I buy my, I did that bumper or stickers that they used to put for Biden. I did that on the gas pumps. Or can I buy stickers for Trump? Said I did that for eggs, for example.
There you go. I got it, Bob. Or where can I get a swastika sticker to put on my Tesla? Thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Helping you win the water cooler wars. I'll be right back with your calls. Stay with us. And welcome back. Nancy in Decatur, Michigan. Hey, Nancy, what's on your mind today?
Oh, thanks for taking my call. Well, I've been listening a lot to a lot of YouTube commentaries, and I'm just wondering why the Republican Party hasn't thought about disassociating themselves from the MAGA party and creating two separate parties, because you have these diehard Republicans who they're so diehard they'll vote Republican no matter what. But they're voting for something they don't believe in, which would be the MAGA party, because they hate the MAGA party. So I'm wondering why they haven't come up with the thought of disassociating themselves from the MAGA party and getting back to their core roots and creating something that disassociates them and makes a clear line that we don't believe in you, you have your own thing, we have our own thing, and maybe that would help us to defeat the MAGA party, because more of the Republicans will get on board with their own real party than this made up.
The answer to your question is fairly straightforward, Nancy. It's a great question, and I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, but the answer is pretty straightforward, and you find it in the 2022 election. You had a handful of Republicans in the House and one in the Senate, Mitt Romney, who voted to impeach Donald Trump. And
yes.
What happened to them? They all lost primary elections. The two highest profile ones are Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, but there was 8 or 10 of their colleagues as well, and every single one of them lost their primaries. They're out. And when you're no longer in power, when you're no longer in Congress, you lose the ability to trade on insider information to make yourself rich on the stock market. You lose the ability to collect large donations from donors that you can put into a PAC and use for your own personal use. You lose the ability to travel in luxury all around the world on federally funded junkets to spend 2 weeks on the beach in Thailand. You lose all the power and accolades that go with that. You lose the ability to stand in front of a crowd of people and get applauded regularly. You lose the ability to have billionaires wine and dine you. Those things are important to a lot of these elected Republicans. So they're willing to sell out the country in exchange for their own personal wealth and comfort. I mean, I don't know how to say it beyond that, but I think that in a very straightforward way, that's pretty much the answer.
Well, I'm sorry, but that just does not make sense to me, because they're creating their own downfall then. They're helping to initiate something that they're trying to not.
You're absolutely right, Nancy. But we've seen this movie before. Look at all the conservatives in Germany in the 1930s who were basically silent about Hitler, or at the end swallowed their pride, swallowed their principles, and said Heil Hitler. And by 1936, 37, I forget what year the Night of the Long Knives was, but many of them actually got killed. Most of them got kicked out of the legislature, out of the German parliament. And
so, in other words, it's not easy to switch party names or add a new party.
It's extraordinarily difficult. It's extraordinarily difficult, and to do so successfully is, particularly in American politics today, virtually impossible. Nancy, great question. Thank you so much for the call. It's 52 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Donald Trump lost, voter suppression won in 2024. That's the headline over at HartmannReport.com, and just a brilliant article written by Greg Palast exclusively for the Hartmann Report. He writes, Trump lost. That is, if all legal voters were allowed to vote, if all legal ballots were counted, Trump would have lost the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Vice President Kamala Harris would have won the presidency with 286 electoral votes. And if not for the mass purge of voters of color, if not for the mass disqualification of provisional and mail-in ballots, if not for the new mass vigilante challenges in swing states, Harris would have gained at least another 3.5 million votes, topping Trump's popular vote tally by 1.2 million. Greg brings us the numbers. He lays it out. You can read it over at HartmannReport.com, absolutely free. It's titled Trump Lost, Vote Suppression Won at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
Trump's got a plan, it's reckless and grand, a debt-fueled gamble to wreck the land. Tariffs rise and crypto schemes in play, while billionaires cheer and the workers pay. Crashing the economy, Trump style.
Welcome back. 54 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Ann in Trinity, Florida. Listening on WMNF. Hey, Ann, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I am calling. Actually, I kind of had two things, but after Ro Khanna yesterday, I really narrowed it down to the one this week.
Bless you.
I am, am a little bit worried because I did not feel, coming from Representative Khanna yesterday, the urgency that's needed. And I do think that, yes, the Democrats are not, I can't remember what you said, bringing a fork to a gunfight.
Yeah, spoon, actually, was
and
the term Anand used, but yeah.
So my thoughts are, and I've called a couple representatives and senators' offices this morning, is that the American public might understand what our government does for us. And now is a time where Democrats can educate people on what it does. I think that people, when they buy airline tickets, they don't understand what the government does for them from that moment until the time they step off that plane landing where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And other things that government does for us.
From regulating the price of the ticket so you don't get robbed, to making sure that if you do get screwed, if the airline cancels your flight or something, you get some compensation, to making sure that everything is safe and that if your luggage gets lost, you have some recourse. All of those things are the result of big government.
Yes, and thank you, Joe Biden, for the majority of some of that stuff more recently. And so I think that my suggestion to the representatives and the senators today was that at the end of every day, a group of them, representatives and senators, hold a presser. And that day, they discuss something that went on at the USDA that has been, something that has been dropped, as they've eliminated. When you go on the Doge site now and you see receipts, it's like just stuff where, hey, we've eliminated this 120,000 square foot building that we're not going to be renewing somewhere in Atlanta. It's kind of things like that. It's a contract, that was eliminated or cut that was maybe agreed to last year for some food to go somewhere that it's needed and things like that. So there's no really things that they can actually say is waste and fraud. And the Democrats, I think, need to get out there every day and tell people this is what they've cut and this is what that group of people.
I'm with you, Ann. In fact, I would say that the federal government is too small. I'll be talking about that tomorrow at some length. But yeah, I'm with you. Ann, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
A recent headline blared,
in addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Thom Hartmann University Book Club. We're reading today from The Last Hours of Humanity, Warming the World to Extinction. This is from chapter 4. It's titled The Clathrate Gun. The deepest place on Earth, the deepest part of our oceans, is a massive canyon in the West Pacific called the Mariana Trench. More than 35,000 feet deep, the pressure of the water is 1,000 times that of the surface of the ocean. At that depth, a normal submarine would collapse like a paper bag. There's very little life there, and what does live is adapted to cold, pressure, and darkness like nowhere else on Earth. The first man to dive solo to the bottom of the Mariana Trench was filmmaker James Cameron. A lay expert on the oceans, in part from his work making the movie Titanic, Cameron designed, funded, built, and in 2012 navigated his own submarine, the Deep Sea Challenger, into these icy depths. To say that James Cameron understands the ocean in a way that few other human beings ever could would be an understatement. From shallow dives to the deepest place on Earth, he knows the seas, and he knows about their methane clathrates. As he told me earlier this year, quote, "The bottom line is that given the number of species expected to die off in the next century just due to climate change and the other effects of our industrial civilization, we are already in the middle of a mass extinction event equivalent to the lesser ones in paleo history, such as the KT extinction that took out the dinosaurs. So the Homo sapien isn't a species that's currently endangered. However, the clathrate gun scenario, James Cameron said, changes that. It doubles down on an already bad situation, putting us on the hit list as well. Not literally, because some people probably will survive in highly artificial environments, meaning the species will perish, but the vast majority of humanity will perish." Cameron added, with a metaphor worthy of his brilliant Avatar movies, "We're talking about the survival of our kids. We collectively are playing Russian roulette. We're putting a gun to their heads and going click, click, click. A clathrate gun." Only discovered in the serious way in the 1960s, there is so much methane in the form of clathrates, such as the frozen methane slurry on the floor of the continental shelves around the oceans of the world, that it's at least double all the known underground coal, oil, and gas on the entire planet. Peter Ward, the paleontologist at the University of Bristol, told me, quote, "Methane is way worse than carbon dioxide. It's inert right now in the soil. It's not affecting anyone in any way. When you warm it, though, it becomes a gas, and then it starts acting immediately as a greenhouse gas. So this is an immediate and very short-term threat to human civilization." For the last decade, a joint U.S.-Russia research team out of the International Arctic Research Center at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, has been exploring the East Siberian Sea. Arctic. They are looking at the bottom of the seafloor where once stable reserves of frozen methane have begun thawing and bubbling up into the atmosphere. Dr. Igor Semeletov told the research team in 2011. He told the British newspaper, The Independent, about what he found that year and the scope of the impending methane problem. Quote, "Earlier, we found torch-like structures like this, but they were only tens of meters in diameter. This is the first time that we found continuous, powerful, and impressive seeping structures more than 1,000 meters in diameter. It's amazing," end of quote. Amazing academically, that is. Horrifying for those of us who call planet Earth home. 1,000 meters is a kilometer, so this is one massive single methane leak, and it's a bit more than a half-mile in diameter. And it is just one of many. Dr. Smeletov added, quote, "I was most impressed by the sheer scale and high density of the plumes. Over a relatively small area, we found more than 100, but over a wider area, there should be thousands of them," end quote. Those sites would have been familiar during the Permian and other extinctions as well. As Paul Wignall explained to me, the significant thing about methane is it's a very effective greenhouse gas, so it causes global warming. Once you trigger warming, if you release methane, it's in positive feedback. It gets warmer and warmer as you release more methane into the atmosphere. So we think of this as a big part of the Permian extinction at that time. This is very rapid warming. Charles Dickens, who had proposed the methane link to the Permian mass extinction, told me, "We know that in the bottom of the seafloor, large parts of the ocean margins have methane in a solid phase. And what happens when you change the temperature, it can melt this frozen methane phase." He added, "The idea is that during some of these extinction events, we have some triggering that forces the ocean temperatures to warm, and then that melts the solid methane phase, which turns into gas and goes into the oceans and atmosphere. Paleontologist Michael Benton concluded, quote, "The risk is runaway greenhouse, which is when the self-correcting mechanisms cease to kick in, and you heat by a little bit and you release methane. That then causes excess heating and you release more methane, and so it goes on." It's believed at the end of the Permian 250 million years ago, this kind of runaway greenhouse gas exacerbated the effect, making it, the Permian mass extinction, an awful lot worse. By 2010, it was said that 8 million tons of methane emissions were being released into the atmosphere every year. But researchers believe that, too, is an underestimate. More recent studies have shown a far more rapid increase in methane, CH4 concentration in the atmospheres. In the last 2 centuries, the amount of methane in the atmosphere has increased from 0.7 ppm to 1.7 ppm. That's the largest known increase in the history of the planet. The book, The Last Hours of Humanity.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome to the second hour of our program. On the line with us, our buddy Alex Lawson, the president of Social Security Works, socialsecurityworks.org, strengthensocialsecurity.org, A Law 202 over on Blue Sky, and, of course, socialsecurityworks.org over on Blue Sky. Alex, the Republicans may well be voting on their budget today. I heard on CNN this morning Republicans saying there's not a single word in there about cutting Medicaid. What's really going on?
I mean, their mouths are moving, so you know they're lying. What's really going on is that they're cowards. We know what their plan is because they are forced to write it down every once in a while. And what their plan is $880 billion in Medicaid cuts. It's a destruction of Medicaid. There are 17 frontline Republicans. These are the ones who are in the closest races. And in every single one of those districts, Tom, the vote margin that they won by is way smaller than the amount of people who will lose their health care if the budget resolution passes. So, you know, for example, you've got Valadeo in California who won by 11,000 votes. But if the budget resolution passes, 288,000 of his constituents are going to lose their health care. That's what they're terrified about. That's why they go on TV and are like, no, we're not doing what we're clearly doing. You know, in Iowa, Rep. Miller Meeks won by 799 votes. 66,000 people in that district will lose their health care if the budget resolution passes. So that's what's at stake. That's why they're waffling right now, because they're losing. And if you're seeing them, what they're putting out into the press right now, they're dancing. They're trying to explain away the fact that their budget is deeply unpopular and that Johnson cannot corral his caucus. I will also point out, though, and this is why, you know, it's going to be a very complex fight going forward, but it's the Republicans in the House who are in the pretzel. We have the truth on our side, the people on our side. They have a caucus that's riven with divisions, and they're having defections from the right of the caucus who are saying, no, we need to really cut into bigger programs. We need to go into Medicare. We need to do more on Medicaid. They want $2.3 trillion. So you have part of their caucus who is saying, you know, this wholesale destruction of the American people's benefits isn't enough. And then you have the other side of their caucus saying, we're definitely going to lose our jobs if we vote for this. And, you know, what's being said to, I think, both sides is that if you stand against this vote, you're going to be standing against President Trump. And they're using scare tactics like that. But a wise person once told me that the first and most often only election that politicians care about is their own. And so that's what we have to work with to block this really horrendous attack on our benefits.
All to pay for tax cuts for billionaires, presumably. Although they're also talking about raising the debt limit by $4.5 trillion. Where is, you know, what is the language that actually cuts Medicaid? Is it some sort of mumbo jumbo, like we're going to means test it, or we're going to increase the means testing, or we're going to put a work requirement on it? I mean, is it one of those kind of no, we're not actually taking the money away, we're just going to change the rules so that fewer people qualify? Is that how they're doing it?
You can be sure that they're going to obfuscate and lie, because that's what they do. But where we are in the actual process, Tom, is that this is like the starting gun. If you remember, the process is so arduous and complex on purpose. It really is difficult to follow. But this vote just instructs the committees with jurisdiction. So it's like, hey, committee who oversees Medicaid, find $880 billion in savings from Medicaid. And savings there means cuts, right? You don't save any other way. So they're going to dress it up, and they're saying, oh yeah, it's waste, fraud, and abuse. It's the same thing that we're seeing Elon Musk and his black hats do, where they're creating this lie, this narrative that what they're doing is rooting out fraud, waste, and abuse, while this dude is personally enriching himself with corrupt contracts. But they're also, you're like, you point to me on the 1,000 veterans that you fired from the VA, where that fraud, waste, and abuse is, because all I see is a destruction of services for veterans. Same thing in the national parks. Is that ranger or that firefighter who's fighting forest fires right after LA burned down? Is that where the fraud, waste, and abuse is? I don't think so. And Tom, you and I know, I'm all for going after fraud, waste, and abuse. Where is it? Medicare Advantage, right? $414 billion. Defense contractors, right? Like, we know where there's real money that they can get, but that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is what Wall Street demands. So I know your listeners understand this, but if you want to see why, go and watch like Bloomberg, CNBC, or one of these channels where Wall Street is the main audience and target, and where their talking points come out. They say very openly that if you're going to give this tax handout, $4.5 trillion, which they desperately want, plus you're doing $4 trillion on the debt ceiling, you have to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And Wall Street's really clear. They never don't say all three. And if you don't do that, then the bond market is going to punish you. And that is what they care about, because that would mean that rich people are affected. So until Wall Street stops calling for their blood sacrifice of our earned benefits, the Republicans will continue to dance to their tune.
So explain to me where this legislation is at. You said that the legislation is calling for a committee to come up with savings. Does that mean this goes into law and then some group has to come up with cuts? Or does that mean that this doesn't go into law, that this sets up something else, some other process? What am I missing here or not understanding?
So this is like the starting gun, and then it goes to the committees, multiple committees, and each of them has, the piece of the budget. So
this is not a vote on a final piece of legislation, on a final budget. Okay,
That's exactly right. This is like a vote on the outline of it, and they could put specifics in, but they don't want to, because they want to keep the specifics as late in the process as possible.
Right.
But so now they're just instructions to the committee. And then the committees have the actual final say on what specific policies. And that allows them to go on TV and lie, pretty easily, because they're like, oh, there's no specific cuts in here. And you're like, that's true, because it's not that part of the process yet.
Right.
But if you remember the IRA, Tom, the Inflation Reduction Act, like the mirror image of this process. So when Biden and the Democrats were in charge, they used budget reconciliation to take on pharmaceutical corporations to get Medicare negotiation, to take on the extractive industries to get hundreds of billions of dollars in investments in American jobs and clean energy. That process took the entire Congress. Remember, you have to do the whole process through the House. You got to get something through the Senate. You got to merge them. Then you got to pass the whole thing through both of them, and then the president's signature. And there's multiple choke points here, including in each committee, where we are going to be just throwing sand in the gears, slowing this process down. Our watchword is sand in the gears, hasten buyer's remorse. And that's why a delay in the vote, a defeat in this first vote, it's not the end. They can just call another vote, right? You can call another vote until you get the results that you want. And in the meantime, they bully their caucus members. You have Donald Trump, you'll have Elon Musk and his black hats, working the phones and threatening. But already they have public no's that would probably, depending on if all of the Democrats can show up, that would already sink it right now. So it's likely to be delayed from tonight. Speaker Johnson is already saying that, that is a possibility, which usually means that's happening. Mm-hmm. But this is the starting gun, and the later we can push the starting gun, the better the outcome's going to be, because the less time they will have to work with to loot the American people.
And that time variable has to do with the government running out of money on March 14th, right?
That's definitely one of them. This process is so complicated. But yes, the resolution actually is like the whole Congress, but also is related to the CR itself, which is also, also sort of related to the debt ceiling. And those are two big choke points that the elected Democrats will have to actually shut down what's going on and say, we're not going to give you the vote. The Republicans can't pass anything on their own. You remember last Congress, it was the least productive Congress in modern history, maybe in American history. So they're going to need Democratic votes, and the Democrats can say,
good luck,
absolutely
Charlie.
No cuts, no cuts to Social Security, no cuts to Medicare, no cuts to Medicaid, and remove as much harm as possible.
Yeah, I totally get it. We have a little more than just a minute here, Alex. What can people do? People who are listening right now who want to help throw sand in the gears.
So go on social media. Social Security Works. Find us. We have all these graphics with everyone's phone number. We have the 17 frontline Republicans. Those are the priority districts. They won by fewer people than healthcare they're going to take away. We're running billboard trucks through all of those districts, just letting everybody know that that's what's going on. And also just call the switchboard, call your member. If you're in these districts, it's super important, but everyone should be hearing about this now. So 202-224-3121, the Capitol switchboard, which your listeners know very well. Make your voice heard right now. Absolutely not one penny of cuts to Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid in this bill or any other.
If they do pass this bill, do you expect that seniors are going to start getting thrown out of nursing homes?
What I expect is the nursing home industry will start to react before the bill actually crosses the finish line, right? So you're going to see harm before the law is actually signed into law. I think it'll be a little bit later when they see the specifics, but I would not put it above private equity to start exiting if they think that. And let me be clear for your audience: $880 billion out of Medicaid would shut down nursing homes all across the country, right? Medicaid is the largest provider of long-term care in this country. In most cases, the only provider. So it's a destruction of that.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Yeah, Alex, brilliant. Thank you so much. Alex Lawson, president of Social Security Works, socialsecurityworks.org. Check them out on whatever social media you're on. Just search for Social Security Works. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Tom.
And welcome back. Daniel in Windsor, North Carolina. Hey, Daniel, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I was just calling to add something to the strategy. Besides gerrymandering, I think they should stop fighting with progressives, because what happens, progressives come up with an idea or want to do something that's a little bit more than Democrats can stomach. They try to jump in front of it and stifle it. So that's my thing. They need to stop fighting with progressives. And then I also think that they should stop talking for Republicans, because every time they get in front of a camera, they always got to say what their what their Republican friends are saying behind the scenes. I don't want to hear them to say that. I'd rather just to hear the Republicans speak for themselves or don't say nothing at all. And then they need to start, that's the kind of energy that I think they need to start coming with.
Yeah, I get it. I agree, Daniel. Very well said. And the Democratic Party really needs to pull its act together collectively. I'm with you. Thank you, Daniel. Jeremiah in Coalport, Pennsylvania. Hey, Jeremiah, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I'll add one thing to your rant this morning. I live in rural Coalport, Pennsylvania, and there's a voting booth, a block down the road. There's one in the town just a mile down the road, and there's one 2 miles down the road. Mm-hmm. We should be driving, there should be only, one voting booth per county in rural Pennsylvania. So I'm really glad to hear your rant this morning, because it's frustrating. Before elections, you always say we need a blowout. We need to show up in overwhelming numbers. You never suggested working the subtraction side of the equation, and now you are.
Yeah.
If you remember, years ago, I called you and suggested that California gerrymander their state.
Yep.
And you had pointed out to me, while they had a nonpartisan commission, and you weren't keen on that idea at the time, and around the same time you're saying, well, if you fight fire with fire, you get burned, and we shouldn't be doing the things that we say we're against.
My thinking has changed.
I'm so glad that it has.
Although I posted
Welcome
this thing,
aboard.
I posted this morning over on Daily Kos, and the one and only comment so far is, how dare you? What? You're telling us to behave like Republicans? Are you kidding? Oh, God. People, I guess they just don't want to win elections. I don't get it beyond that. But yeah, this is a mess. And that's another thing to add is Republicans have been pulling drop boxes, and polling places out of black neighborhoods forever. I mean, this is another big thing I should have included in the article that they've been doing aggressively since the Voting Rights Act was gutted in 2013 in the Shelby County decision. And, so why aren't they pulling polling places or drop boxes out of rural areas? Like you say, Pennsylvania, you got a Republican governor, you've got a Democratic governor.
No, we have Josh Shapiro.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I misspoke. And you've got a Democratic governor and you've got a Democratic Secretary of State. They could certainly say, okay, we're going to dial back on the number of voting places in some of these bright red areas. Jeremiah, thank you. Spot on. And thanks for reminding me about your call. It's 22 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in just a minute. Stick around. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So Richard Nixon was a crook, but not a lot of Americans knew that in 1960. But he lost to John Kennedy, not because he was a crook, but because he didn't know how to use television. He refused to wear makeup during the debates. Jack Kennedy understood television, and it was why he was so, widely popular. Calvin Coolidge was the first president to use radio in 1923, but Franklin Roosevelt did his fireside chats starting in 1933, just after he was inaugurated, and they were often listened to by a third of Americans. That's why he got reelected 3 times. He was elected 4 times to president. If Joe Biden had done the same thing during his 4 years, reaching all the American people every week, using social media, the new media, because that was radio and television back in the day, he would be in the White House right now, or Kamala Harris. There's a whole article about this, how Democrats need to get with the plan. They need to figure out how to use social media and get some charismatic candidates out there. Over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Democrats' Fatal Flaw. Check it out.
The ink was fresh on his solemn vow. Trump signed the pardons, they're free somehow. The ones who stormed where the nation meets now walk away from their crimes complete. Heroes, he said, who stood for the cause as they shattered the walls of our nation's laws, turning the guilty into the brave with the stroke of a pen. Justice betrayed. Pardons of January 6th, what do they show? A nation divided with nowhere to go. No peace restored, no healing begun. Just two nations, not one, under the sun.
25 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. So Donald Trump ordered Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, to strip out of legislation, out of this funding bill, $103 million that funded an entity called the Legal Services Corporation. Now, this is amazing, and most people don't even know what the Legal Services Corporation is. It turns out that when there's a disaster, like a hurricane hits Florida or Alabama, or an earthquake hits California, or a mudslide or a fire, that when people go to their insurance companies and say, would you please pay up, the insurance companies fight them tooth and nail, and very often do so in ways that are deceptive or dishonest, or they just drag it out as long as they possibly can. The Legal Services Corporation is a nonprofit funded with federal government money that provides legal advice and assistance to people fighting against their insurance companies after disasters. This is necessary because the insurance industry in America is so corrupt. It had a $103 million budget last year. It helped, millions of Americans who had horrible crises as a result of climate change disasters or other disasters. Negotiate with FEMA and negotiate with, and even in many cases, sue their insurance companies. And the insurance industry hates this entity. They absolutely hate it. And so they went to the Republicans and said, hey, here's a big wad of money, kill the funding for the Legal Services Corporation. And Mike Johnson just did it. Isn't this astonishing? Brian Grimm's writing about it over at dropsitenews.com if you want, all the details. What's up with Elon Musk and his 13th child? Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And, of course, your calls on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. He does not want this cash, the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. During the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Koch's products without ever seeing Koch's name attached. Koch refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Koch is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Koch makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Kochland, by Christopher Leonard.
Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out. You know, other countries enjoy benefits like free health care in college, modern mass transit, affordable housing, food, and drugs. They also have inexpensive internet and phone service without companies listening and selling their information. Schools that don't need to mention school shooters. Streets and parks filled with pedestrians and children instead of tents and homeless people. We, on the other hand, have the world's largest collection of billionaires. Most Americans probably didn't realize this was the choice they were making back in the election of 1980 when Reagan and Bush promised morning in America. But here we are. We have been just basically sold out to the billionaires by all these years of Republican, Reaganomics. What do we do about it? Well, there's a lot we can do about it, and it starts with getting politically active. There's a great op-ed about this over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled, America Chose Wealth Over Well-Being. Check it out.
Rises on the air. A virus mutates, the world's unprepared. The lessons of the past are clear, but poor leadership brings us fear. Bird flu spreads, the stakes are high. Lives beneath the sky. Science fades where chaos reigns, and history's weight returns again. Trump, bird flu, and the new pandemic threat. The cost of failure we can't forget. Leadership matters when crises appear. The choices we make will shape the years.
Welcome back, 36 minutes past the hour. So I had never heard of Ashley St. Clair. Apparently she's a big deal right-wing influencer, like on social media. And she also had, at least according to her, Elon Musk's 13th child. And now she's releasing these text messages between her and Elon where she says, why don't you come, see your baby? And why don't you come sign the birth certificate? And he says, I get credible death threats every day. I'm number 2 after Trump for assassination. Wake up. This is not the time for sentiment at the expense of safety. I mean, he could fly her to wherever, to the D.C., but apparently, I don't know, maybe he can't afford it now that Tesla stock is down 7%. But anyhow, in one of these text messages, he said, I want to knock you up again. Oh, my God. This is the guy who is running our government right now? So what's on your mind? What say you? CJ in Shreveport, Louisiana. Hey, CJ, what's up?
Oh, okay. Wow. All right.
Top that one.
About your earlier opening rant, I was going to follow up on something I'd said before, but I'm going to talk about the rant. Voter fraud. We could use the Brennan Center statistics, but that's a lib organization. Let's go with righteous, right-wing Heritage Foundation.
Okay.
If you go to heritage.org and look at their voter fraud database, they have you could categorize it. What kind of fraud? Let me mute my YouTube. What kind of fraud could photo ID, actually do anything about?
None. There is.
There's one kind.
What's that?
Impersonation fraud at the polls.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of it, but that just doesn't happen.
Well, that's my point, because when you look at their database, which covers every election from the most recent back to 1982, state, local, as well as federal, so at least 3 billion total ballots cast, probably more than that, but we'll lowball it. 3 billion. They have found their database lists 31, of which approximately half are miscategorized.
Just 31 cases of impersonation fraud.
Not 31,000, not 3,100, 31. 31.
Since 1982.
It all fits on one page if you tell it 50 results per page.
Oh, my. I got it.
And I wanted to chart that, to put a chart up about how small it is. So imagine a rectangle, and then a smaller rectangle, and that's the whole total ballots count. We have a smaller rectangle. Darn it, I got to get back to my YouTube tab here and mute this. Okay. So if you go back to where you make a big rectangle and we put a smaller rectangle inside to represent the impersonation fraud ballots. Do you know how small that smaller rectangle would be?
Probably 1 pixel.
No. If you were to use an 8K ultra theatrical wide display, the largest display that's available for people, for the general public, such a display, 8,192 by 4,320 pixels, 35,389,400 total pixels. You would still need to arrange 6 of those in a 3x2 video wall, stretch the rectangle to nearly fill that whole area for it to be 1 pixel.
Wow. Yeah. I get it, CJ. I get it. CJ, thanks for that information. I had no idea the Heritage Foundation had that database. That's good to know. Thank you so much for calling and sharing that. Ari in Eureka, California. Hey, Ari, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I'm going to start with my suggestion for messaging, which is they're going to kill your granny.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's time to reprise that Paul Ryan ad where he was pushing Granny off the cliff.
Yeah, they're going to kill your granny. But I wanted to report in on a town hall I went to last night.
Actually, if I could interrupt you, the phrase should be, they're going to kill your granny to pay for tax cuts for Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's a little too,
I know, it's too long
to fit on a bumper sticker, but yeah. But yeah, they're going to kill your granny. So I went to Jared Hussman's town hall. Mm-hmm. He represents California District 2.
And he's which party?
Fantastic. He's Democrat.
Okay.
I think he used to be a lawyer for the NRDC. He's amazing. I love him. Mm-hmm. And he said all the right things about how hard they're fighting and how they're not going to help the Republicans fund the government if we don't get some things that we absolutely want, like, you know, no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, blah, blah, blah. But I still feel like our guys don't understand that those guys are not playing by the rules.
Yeah.
And I'm really worried about that. I wish I had been able to ask my question, which was, when the courts say Trump and Elon must do this and they don't do it, what are they going to do? What's the plan?
Well, even at the beginning, there's no rule, no federal law or rule that says that a president can bring a South African billionaire in to gut the government.
Right.
I mean, this is all illegal.
What are they going to do about it?
All of this stuff is just profoundly illegal. Now, I realize, you know, a couple of courts in some small ways have ratified some of it. So apparently it's not all illegal, but, you know, other courts have knocked down much of it too, so.
Yeah, so what are they going to do about it? I mean, nobody has an answer to that, and it's freaking me out.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what we really want right now is some, you know, guerrilla theater, some political theater. You know, what would Martin Luther King have done? I mean, when I was watching Hakeem Jeffries last night, he was saying, you know, in my family, we had, you know, people who were the victims of discrimination and slavery, and, you know, we've been oppressed, and we understand this. And I'm like, well, you know, why aren't you out marching? Why aren't you out getting arrested?
Can we just put Jasmine Crockett in charge of all of that?
Put me at the front of that list, of supporters for Jasmine Crockett being the new Speaker of the House, or the new leader of the Democrats in the House of Representatives anyway, and the next Speaker of the House. And yeah, absolutely. That's a woman who really gets it. She understands what she's talking about. She believes in what she's saying. She's so articulate. She is just one of the most, speech-wise, public speaking, presentation. She's one of the most brilliant members of the House of Representatives. God bless her. And she represents Texas, for God's sake. I mean, they're really that's great.
Well, if somebody doesn't change the game soon, my next call to you is going to be you talking me off the ledge, or at least off the airplane somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I'm not sure I'll be able to do that because, it may be the other way around.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. Ari, thank you for the call. Your point is so well taken. Thank you. Tody in Nisida, Malta. Hey, Tody, what's on your mind today?
Correct. Hey, it's fascism. It's on my mind every day.
Okay, tell me about it.
Especially fighting back against it. I want to just really quick establish a standing, all right? Because what's an Icelandic expat in Malta talking about fascism in the U.S.? So where I'm standing now in Malta, on the rock, as we call it, I'm looking over the harbor, where for 2 years, from 1940 to 42, there were more bombs that fell on each square kilometer than fell on Stalingrad.
Whoa.
And the 94-year-old lovely woman who lives next to me, she clearly remembers these days from 9 to 11 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know geography, Malta is a tiny rock in the middle of the Mediterranean. The only friends were the tiny rock of Gibraltar, way in the west, and a port in Egypt, way in the east.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else was enemies. Mm-hmm. And there's a cross in the left corner of the Maltese flag, which is the St. George Medal that the entire island was awarded. So these things are, I think, much more present in the European mind than Americans, regardless of Pearl Harbor and all of this. There are very few people who have neighbors with a living memory of this in the U.S.
You're right.
And the European West Theater, the D-Day, that was 20% of the German army. But I'm sorry, I digress. What I wanted to say is, having established standing, that at this point in time, I've been calling this surreal or Kafkaesque or whatever, but it's real. It's stone cold real, and we have to face it as such.
It being the fascism of the Trump administration? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, the auto coup, the fascist auto coup that's taking place in the U.S. and with a certain fascist axis. Mm-hmm. This is an absolute objective reality that people have to wake up to.
Toti, do most of your neighbors in Malta agree with that sentiment? And if I recall from our previous conversation, you're originally Icelandic. I assume you still have some contact with your relatives and friends in Iceland. How are the Icelanders and the Maltese reacting to Trump broadly?
Beyond shocked. Iceland is an old protectorate of Denmark, just as Greenland, right? And Malta is a protectorate of the UK. And I can tell you that people don't realize that Greenland has cultural ties, inter-Scandinavian ties. We read each other's children's literature, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, there's 1,000-year culture. Not a 200-year-old, right?
So there's a broad reaction to. Forgive me for interrupting, but we're going to hit a break here in about 20 seconds.
Go ahead.
So there's a broad anti-Trump reaction across at least these two European countries.
Extremely, and that's why I have concrete things that I want to do. I'll have to talk to you about that next time, because I have boycotting measures that I have to do, and I know people maybe don't like it, but I was coming on a convention, 20-year anniversary of a gaming convention. I was bringing 12 people, $60,000 budget, and I have to cancel. And it's a horrible sacrifice for me, but I can't participate in the economy while this is happening.
Because that would have been a trip to America. That's what you're talking about, a convention in America?
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
yes,
I got it.
60 U.S. I'd have to spend, and I can't add it to this economy that's happening now.
That's happening. I mean,
I love my American friends.
Yeah, no, I got it, Toti. Down in Florida, the tourism board is freaked out because there's apparently, hundreds of thousands of Canadians who are not coming to Florida.
You're
right
listening
now.
to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Toti, I got to run, but thank you so much for the call. I always look forward to your calls. Thank you. It's 48 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Lawson in Decatur, Georgia. Hey, Lawson, what's on your mind today?
Hi, how are you, sir?
I am fine, thank you. I hope you are the same. What's up?
Yes, I am. So I read an article by you, and I was just fascinated. And I don't know, you have the show, and I just want to express just something that of course, I feel like America dealing with is the way that our country is heading toward, which is the first time in my lifetime, and I'm sure a lot of in other people's lifetime. So we are not prepared. We are not informed of what is ahead, how dark it can be. Learning about President Trump and how he was, reported admiring. Sorry, I'm just a little bit nervous. Admiring Hitler and everything, and he played the playbook of that, and you could see that in his actions and everything like that. So what? And then I realized that, okay, if he is playing the playbook of Hitler, how do we counterattack that?
Yeah, and now he's admiring Putin and following his playbook.
That's also true. It's another form of dictator, so pretty much any dictator.
Yep.
But Putin, so far, had not been defeated, but we did know that Hitler was defeated. And was defeated by Winston Churchill. So, I mean, there was a lot more on that, but so it just crossed my mind that if he is doing that, why don't we counteract with Winston Churchill's method as in bringing the best in people, because I do feel like bring out the worst in people. He feared people, and that's how he got in power, is because of the fear, versus if we just counteract with kindness, with love, with bringing the best on people and saying, hey, you can do that, because Trump makes people feel like they can, and he can do everything for them.
Yeah, I get your point, Lon, but Churchill did not defeat Hitler with love and kindness.
He did bring out the best in his people. He encouraged people that, hey, we can do this, we can do that. And yes, I do probably miss a lot, but how is it? Because I see, even talking to friends and family, like, why is it you're so angry? Why is it that certain things that we can't even talk about these days? And I feel like with Trump, he used that to put more fear into them, and that's very troubling if we don't somehow able to get them back out.
Well, that's exactly true, and I have a couple of dear friends. One's German and the other's Scottish, who the other day on Facebook were going on a rant about, Zelensky's a criminal and Trump is doing right, and Putin had to invade Ukraine because of NATO, and I'm like, oh my God, people I've known for 30 years are buying into this Russian propaganda. It's just, I think it's happening to all of us, that we all know somebody who has been sucked in by this stuff because it's so widespread. And I just, you call it out, you point it out. I said to them, I'm really sorry you guys are such suckers. And, I think I've lost a friendship, or two of them, actually. Lon, I got to run, but I don't have any easy answers beyond that. I think you're right. Character does matter. Thank you so much for the call. It's 52 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you in just a second. Stay with us. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
Will Republicans stand up for the land, or kneel to the strong man with blood on his hands? He's turning our schools to his factory line, where history's twisted and truth is a crime. He bows before tyrants, he dreams of their might. He'll break every treaty, abandon the fight. He purges the soldiers who dare to say no. Will Republicans stand up or just let it go? So tell me now, tell me plain, will you break free or bow in shame? The warning is clear, the hour is nigh. Will you stand up or let it die?
54 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. George in Cripple Creek, Virginia. Hey, George, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. You see, President Trump is demanding that President Zelensky signed a deal to provide U.S. exclusive access to $500 billion worth of Ukrainian rare earth metals in exchange for past and future U.S. military aid. And Trump claims the U.S. has provided $350 billion, where in reality it's about half of that. And what I understand, Zelensky will sign the deal if Trump promises certain security guarantees. Like one of the proposals is any peace deals, the European and NATO members, mainly Britain and France, would provide ground troops to enforce the deal, and the U.S.
Trump won't sign that, though, George. You and I both know it.
I know, yeah.
Because Putin won't let him.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be a bad deal. But, talking about Russian propaganda, I told you I read Pravda and Izvestia every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share a joke with you that was current in the old Soviet Union. It's clean, but understand that, Pravda in Russian means truth, and Izvestia means news. Pravda net Izvestia Pravda.
I'll give you that in English. There's no truth in
news. There is no truth.
Exactly. No truth in the news. No news in the truth. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. I remember that. I remember that from the '80s, living in Germany, right on the East German border. The old Pravda Izvestia joke. That's been around for a long time, George.
Oh yeah, that's probably since Stalin's time.
Yeah. So what are you seeing? I mean, you speak Russian. You're a former intelligence guy. What are you seeing in the Russian press that might inform us about the direction things are going? And by the way, we only have about 45 seconds. My apologies.
Okay, well, quick one. Yeah, one of the Putin's demands is that NATO roll back membership to the 1990s borders, and that would exclude all the former Warsaw Pact nations such as Poland and the Baltics. And that would make it a lot easier for Putin to expand his war into Eastern Europe if those nations no longer fell.
That's not even being reported in America that Putin's demanding that.
Yeah, that and in Russia, that would be a real deal breaker.
Yeah, I wonder how long it'll be before Trump starts echoing that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. By the way, I love those songs you and Louise are putting on the air.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's all Louise. She writes the.
She's a lot more. She's about my age and a lot better for that kind of stuff than I am, but tell her I enjoy it.
I'll do that, George. George, thanks so much for your call. I always enjoy hearing from you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, keep up the good work, and I'm outside today since the weather's sunny on Sirius XM.
Oh, that's sweet. That's sweet. George, thank you. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Sabrina Haake is going to drop by. She did business in Russia and has some stories to tell us. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, sources, and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Cokeland, The Secret History of Coke Industries and Corporate Power in America by Christopher Leonard. This is from the preface. On May 18th, 1981, 4 Wall Street bankers traveled to Wichita, Kansas. They went there to make an offer to Charles Koch, the CEO of an obscure mid-size energy company. The bankers from Morgan Stanley wanted to convince Koch to take his family's company public, offering shares for sale on the New York Stock Exchange. Their deal was squarely in line with the conventional wisdom of corporate America at the time. Going public was seen as a natural progression for companies like Koch Industries, offering them access to big pools of money and promising enormous paydays for the existing team of executives. All it required from the CEO was to surrender control. Morgan Stanley, in return, would collect a small fortune in fees. Charles Koch was 45 years old. He had run Koch Industries since he was 32 when his father died suddenly. He was trim, tall, and had an athlete's build. He spoke quietly in meetings and seemed almost passive. The bankers laid out their plan to take Koch public. They revealed what, to most executives at least, might have been the most significant detail. If Charles Koch agreed to the deal, he could earn $20 million overnight. The bankers seemed incredulous when they prepared a confidential memo about Koch's reaction. He does not want this cash, the memo reported. Charles Koch calmly explained to them why their offer made no sense. His company was breathtakingly profitable. It operated in vital, deeply complex corners of the American energy industry. In the 1980s, Koch Industries was the largest purchaser and transporter of U.S. crude oil. It owned an oil refinery. It employed teams of commodity traders who bought and sold a wildly diverse menu of raw materials and financial products, from gasoline to paper futures contracts. This might have encouraged most CEOs to take their company public. Koch Industries, however, did not want outsiders to know how much money its traders were earning. Taking the company public would expose too many of its secrets. The memo said, certain of Koch's commodity traders are particularly worried that their high salaries, once disclosed to the public, would be used against them by their trading partners. Secrecy was a strategic necessity for Koch Industries. Charles Koch did not want to surrender it. He also didn't want to surrender control. He had a specific, clear vision of how to run his company, and he didn't need Wall Street investors to interfere. If the bankers expected Charles Koch to go along with the conventional wisdom of their time, then they, like so many outsiders, did not understand him. Beneath his low-key veneer, Charles Koch was, at his core, a fighter. He had unmovable ideas about how things should be, and he did not back down when challenged. When he was challenged by his own brothers for control of Koch Industries, he fought them in a bitter legal battle that lasted decades. When he was challenged by members of a powerful labor union during his first years as CEO, he fought them even as they committed an act of industrial sabotage that nearly destroyed Koch's oil refinery. When the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice launched a criminal investigation into Koch Industries' oil gathering business, Charles Koch fought them with every legal and political tool at his disposal. When a liberal Congress and President Barack Obama sought to impose regulations on the fossil fuel industry to control greenhouse gas emissions, Charles Koch fought them in ways that changed U.S. politics. In each of these fights, Charles Koch prevailed. When Charles Koch dismissed the bankers in 1981, it was just a small skirmish in the larger war to control Koch Industries. After prevailing in that fight, he created a company that was true to his vision. He avoided the snares that entangled many publicly traded companies that report their financial results to investors every 3 months. Koch Industries didn't have to think quarter to quarter. The company thinks year to year. An internal think tank and deal-making committee called the Development Group will sometimes think through a business deal on a timeline measured in decades. This long-term view made Koch more nimble where other companies stumbled. In 2003, for example, Koch Industries bought a group of money-losing fertilizer plants when no publicly traded company was willing to take the risk. Today, those plants are as profitable as a broken ATM machine that spews out cash around the clock. Unlike publicly traded companies, Koch Industries does not pay out rich dividends to investors. Charles Koch insists on reinvesting at least 90% of the company's profits, fueling its constant expansion. This strategy laid the foundation for decades of continuous growth. Koch Industries expanded continuously by purchasing other companies and branching out into new industries. It specialized in the kind of businesses that are indispensable to modern civilization, but which most consumers never directly encounter. The company is embedded in the hidden infrastructure of everyday life. Millions of people use Coke's products without ever seeing Coke's name attached. Coke refines and distributes fossil fuels, from gasoline to jet fuel, on which the global economy is dependent. Coke is the world's third largest producer of nitrogen fertilizer, which is the cornerstone of our modern food system. Coke makes the synthetic materials used in baby diapers, waistbands, and carpets. It makes the chemicals used for plastic bottles and pipes. It owns Georgia Pacific, which makes the wall panels, beams, and plywood required to build homes and office buildings. It makes napkins, paper towels, stationery, newspaper, and personal hygiene products. Koch Industries owns a network of commodities trading offices in Houston, Moscow, Geneva, and elsewhere, which are the circulatory system of modern finance. The book, Cokeland, by Christopher Leonard.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. If you haven't subscribed to the Haake Take, you need to get over to Substack or Sabrina Haake, Haake, Sabrina, Sabrina Haake.substack.com, or just plug her name into substack.com and it'll pop right up, or Haake Take, Haake. The federal trial attorney, 20-plus years, specializing in First and 14th Amendment defense, contributor to numerous law journals and publications, including the Chicago Tribune. And apropos of today's conversation, Sabrina used to do business in Russia. Sabrina Haake, welcome back to the program. Tell us about your adventures in Putin land.
Thanks, Tom. Well, it was before Putin's time. It was actually a more hopeful time. It was in the 90s. So I did trademark licensing agreements everywhere, including Russia, China, South America, et cetera. And I had to go to Russia because our licensee eventually challenged our trademark after years of successfully doing business together and a great symbiosis. They decided to challenge it. The reason I'm alarmed by this latest move, which I mean, it's kind of hard to figure out what to be alarmed by. It's almost quaint to worry about corrupt practices, given that we may be seeing jackboots on the ground within a month. Not to be an alarmist, but I am alarmed. So foreign corrupt practices, bribery almost seems quaint compared to that potential. But when I was there doing business with a Russian licensee, I had to go to the Rospatent, which is like the U.S. Trademark and Patent Office. We were facing a challenge, and one of the directors said to me point blank, "Your client is at a disadvantage legally." And I said, "Why?" And then she said, "Because you're not allowed to bribe officials," with her hand out, basically. So at that time, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act was in effect, and before Trump's time, federal law really mattered. Most corporations I did business with would have nothing to do with a request for a bribery. And certainly my client didn't. We decided to dig our heels in and litigated. We hired Baker McKenzie out of Moscow, and we litigated. We spent many years, millions of dollars, and eventually won. The reason it's so alarming is that Trump, there's a press release today where Trump is saying we're suspending the enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is the very thing that kept me from paying a bribe in Russia, because he says it's an unfair playing field. Well, that's just ridiculous. What he's done in doing is making it far more dangerous to do business abroad. And you have to wonder, why is he so obsessed with gutting corrupt and bribery laws? In his first term, Rex Tillerson wouldn't go along with it, but he wanted to set aside the corruption laws and the bribery laws then as well. It suggests, obviously, that he thinks bribery is a fine way of doing business. Mm-hmm. American businesses are not at a disadvantage by not bribing. They are going to be made much more vulnerable to bribery requests, extortions, and the killings that are going on in Moscow are also frightening. I stayed at the Radisson Stolichnaya, which was right across the street from the Moscow subway, which is a beautiful old Stalin-era subway without really a scratch on the seats. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I stayed there because of the proximity to the subway station. One of the American businessmen who helped develop that Radisson was gunned down while I was there on his way to walking down the stairs to the subway. He had started saying that he was fighting with the Russian, the Chechen mafia, that Russians wouldn't play fair. Nothing could be more true than what he said. Russians don't play fair. It's part of their ethos. Putin is a KGB trained agent. Anyone who doesn't see or know that he is disappearing critics and disappearing businesses that won't play along with him isn't paying attention. We don't have accurate figures right now on the number of business people who have been murdered in Russia, but at least 38 that I've seen documented. And you have to understand, Russian state news doesn't let this information out. So we don't have an accurate grasp on how many executives and how many business people are murdered in Russia every year. But it's a way of doing business. The man who was murdered while I was there, the hotel developer, said that murder is a business procedure in Russia, and he's absolutely right. So you have to wonder what Trump is really trying to do by legalizing bribery in the foreign context, which suggests it's going to be legalized here as well. And the quote that I saw from him today, he is talking specifically about arms dealers, how arms dealers and fossil fuel concerns have been at a disadvantage by being prosecuted for the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. That just means they've been prosecuted for trying to engage in bribery. And I don't understand why anyone would think it's a good idea to legalize bribery, especially in this setting, especially when you consider that he has been doing Putin's bidding on all sides. It's alarming that he's trying to bring the KGB kind of thuggery into the United States business practices.
Yeah, I totally get it. Back in the 80s and 90s, I was working with an international relief organization, and we did business. I was in Russia as well, although I was never solicited for a bribe. But I also went into Haiti to negotiate, for some property that we were going to use to build a program there, and their equivalent of housing and urban development. Their government minister, cabinet level or whatever their equivalent is in Haiti, just sitting in the meeting with me and my colleague from Germany, just right out said, give me $20,000 and we can make this happen. Cash, I want cash. And I was able to say, I'm sorry, that's against the law for me to do that. We just, I could go to jail in the United States if I gave you that bribe, which was a really easy out for us.
Right.
And I just can't understand why Donald Trump would want to end that law unless around him, or maybe the Russian oligarchs who are pulling his strings, want to be able to take or receive bribes.
Absolutely.
I can't see any upside to the United States of America. I can't, and I know my colleagues. I mean, I still am in touch with many of the people that I worked with back in the 80s and 90s. We started. I participated in starting programs in Uganda and Colombia and Peru. In India, in Russia, there was another dozen countries, and in the United States. And I just can't imagine that any of them would ever want to, have somebody say, give me 20 grand and I'll make this happen. And by the way, if you don't, there can be some consequences to you because I know you can do it.
And we're talking about millions. And put it in the context of Trump, when he was running for office of this re-election period, offering anyone, the oil tycoons, the fossil fuel planet destroyers, on the record, if you give me $1 billion, I will set aside the climate regulations.
That's right. Trump solicited a bribe.
How is that not a bribe?
Yeah.
How is this whole thing? Can I just say a little bit about treason? I don't know how much time you have.
Yeah.
I'm talking now about what he's done with the military, politicizing the military. He's politicized every organization that has force in the rule of law. To me, it's clear that he's getting ready to do something horrifically nefarious, like boots on the ground, et cetera. I think it's time for people to start thinking about how they're going to arm in their own communities. And I want to say a word about sedition. I get pushback sometime on social media about this. How is that not sedition? I want to remind your viewers, the Colorado Supreme Court found that Trump had engaged legally in insurrection in that Article 14 14th Amendment Article 3 case that came out of Colorado, the U.S. Supreme Court put their stamp on that finding. When the Supreme Court said that Colorado couldn't enforce this law on its own because it would lead to chaos, they did not set aside the Supreme Court of Colorado's finding that Trump had engaged in insurrection. So there is a standing Supreme Court imprimatur on the finding that Trump is an insurrectionist. Yeah. So if you are fighting against an insurrectionist and you're fighting a seditionist, you are the patriots. You are not the seditionist, you're fighting the seditionist. So I want to make that clear. Well, I think we're going to have to talk about our neighbors getting armed and what we're going to do in the blue states when Trump starts cutting off benefits, FEMA, et cetera, to blue states. There are a number of things we can do, including why would you even pay taxes if we're going to be treated like that? But we need to get serious about what we're dealing with here. Trump has politicized the military and the Department of Justice, all law enforcement, and he's put in unqualified lackeys. He's doing this for.
I get it, and I've been saying for years and years. I mean, I've had for years on this program. I used to debate right wingers, and sometimes they would come on. In fact, some of the militia people would come on. And talk about how, we're going to take on the government with our guns. And I'm like, you can't take on the government with your guns. I mean, try taking down a Black Hawk helicopter and a battalion. It ain't going to happen. And so I have to push back on let's get weapons here, although I'm not discouraging people from being armed. But to your point, and I think most Americans don't realize, if Trump gives an order to the military to shoot at civilians, to do a Kent State, only, on steroids, a slaughter of people who are protesting, for example. If Trump gave that order is subject to the senior JAG officers, the senior attorneys in the Pentagon saying, no, that's an illegal order. The military should not follow that. And those are the people that he just fired.
He fired. That's exactly right. The adjutant generals, the JAGs for the military, there's no reason for Trump to fire them. Their sole role is to tell Trump that this order that you've given is unconstitutional.
That's right.
Why would he fire them other than the fact that he is planning on giving unconstitutional orders, which he's already done?
Yes, so, and he tried to do in his last term in office, as General Milley tells us. He wanted Milley's people to shoot at protesters, just shoot at their legs, right?
Right. I hope Milley and the other generals I hope the generals are all talking to each other. I assume they're not sitting quietly or off on vacation.
Well, I don't know about raising Cain, right? I mean, my God. Who Trump says showed up in Iraq, a 3-star general showed up illegally wearing a MAGA hat. Now, General
said,
Cain,
I'll kill for you.
Yeah, and General Cain says, no, I never did that, or at least the people around him say he never did that. But these are, I'm with you, Sabrina. We just have, by the way, 10 seconds. We have to take this stuff very seriously.
Right, I agree. There's no hyperbole that's off the table here. What's happening is very serious, and it took Hitler less than 2 months to completely undo the German.
53 days. Check out the Haake Take over on Substack, Haake. Haake Take. Do I have that right, Sabrina?
You do, the Haake Take, and it's free.
Okay, absolutely, and it's really worth reading. Just go to Substack.com and plug it in, and it'll pop right up. Sabrina, thanks so much. It's always great talking with you.
Thanks for all you do. Thank you.
Back at you.
Bye-bye.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So what's up with this Republican House member who isn't getting arrested right now? I'll tell you about that. It's an amazing story. Stick around. And welcome back to Paul in Union, Washington. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking the call and turning the speaker off there. I just wanted to say that I'm going to the rally on Tuesday here at the state capitol in Olympia, and that was at 501, I think you mentioned earlier.
5050.1, yeah.
Yeah, 5050.1. I had never heard of that before, but I got referenced that from my brothers and sisters, and they said, hey, go to that, so I'm making my sign. You mentioned earlier also about what the World War II veterans would be saying about this embrace of Putin. And my dad was a World War II vet, I know he'd be completely appalled. He would just think this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah, appalled is hardly a strong enough word. I mean,
yes,
my father would be
hideous,
furious.
You know.
He would be on the verge of taking up arms, I think.
Right, and I try not to hate anything, but I can loathe, and man, do I loathe what's going on right now. And one final thing, and it has to do with the Trump being a rapist and E. Jean Carroll. There was a judge, I don't know if it was Mershon or somebody, but the reason he had to come out and say that it was rape versus sexual assault, or as rape as most people would understand it, wasn't that because Trump countersued E. Jean Carroll after she came out and said rape after the verdict?
I don't recall, but the judge did clarify and said because he and I'm reluctant to get too graphic here, but because he digitally penetrated her, that was the phrase he used. That's not considered rape under New York law, but that is considered rape under the law of probably more than half the states. And that was the point he made. He said it's rape as most people would understand it, even if it's not technically rape under New York state law.
Yeah, and that's how I understand it as well. But I think that the reason the judge had to do that was because Trump countersued her for libel after the fact. Like, she came out after the thing and said, went on the news or her thing and said, yeah, that proves that I got raped. And he countersued her for libel. I'm not sure if that's true or not. You can.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look it up myself. I don't recall the details.
Anyway, thanks. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, good talking to you, Paul. Appreciate the call. Peter in Winchester, Virginia. Hey, Peter, what's up?
Hi. So I had a couple of questions. The first one is, do you think that the profound anxiety that most people in the country are feeling about watching the country be disassembled would be calmed a little bit if there was a central democratic organization that would publicize everything bad that Trump is doing? In other words, we'd have no leadership in that. There's nobody to turn to.
Yeah. I am, as I mentioned in the first hour of the program, I was horrified last night when I saw Hakeem Jeffries on Rachel Maddow's program. Every time
Me too. I saw it.
Yeah, and every time Chuck Schumer speaks, I cringe. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Jasmine Crockett, there's a handful, maybe 8 or 10 people, Maxwell Frost. There's a handful of Democrats who are out there, Eric Swalwell, speaking the way that it needs to be spoken. And none of them are in Democratic leadership. And that, in my opinion, politically is a crime. And it's also a threat to our democracy. Peter, thank you. Yes, I agree with you. Thank you, your analysis. Thank you. It's 22 minutes past the hour. Stick around. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them.
The night was cold, the air was thin. Another story left untold within. In Moscow streets where shadows play, another Russian fell out the window today. Whispers in the halls of power, where fear and silence always tower. Questions hang like smoke in air. Was it fate or was it carefully prepared? Another Russian fell out the window. Where did the truth go? Does anybody know? Voices silenced, stories untold, in the land where secrets are controlled. A journalist, a voice of light, exposing darkness in the dead of night. But truth in Russia comes at a price. Another window, another life. In the Kremlin shadow, fear-proof claim each time, but the pattern shows a darker rhyme. Another Russian fell out the window. Where did the truth go?
24 minutes past the hour. Is that the fate of America? Is that what's coming for us? Another journalist, another opponent of Trump falls out a window. Meanwhile, you probably have never heard of Congressman Corey Mills. He's a Republican from Orlando in the U.S. House of Representatives. He lives in D.C., and apparently his family does not, because he's been getting it on with a 27-year-old woman. I don't know how old he is, but he's got a gray beard and gray sideburns. And here's the story. I'll just read it straight up. This is from Jay Quo over at statusquo.substack.com, KUO. Police arrived at a D.C. luxury penthouse apartment last Wednesday night over a reported assault. A 27-year-old woman, physically shaking and scared when the police arrived, had reported the incident. She showed them bruises and identified her significant other as the perpetrator. That man is GOP Representative Corey Mills. The unnamed woman, who is not Mills's wife, said they have been romantically involved for over a year. Mills's office is downplaying the incident, calling it a private matter, and the victim has now changed her tune, much like Pete Hegseth's wives. NBC News has reviewed three different police reports. The first police report says that over the phone, the woman let officers hear Mills instruct her to lie about the origin of her injuries. When the police arrived, she showed them fresh bruises on her arm. Mills later made contact with the police and admitted to them that the situation had escalated from a verbal altercation to a physical one severe enough to cause bruising. Now, that admission by the congressman is enough for an arrest warrant. And in fact, the police issued an arrest warrant. But it has to be signed off on by the D.C. federal prosecutor, who is this guy, Ed Martin, who is Trump's guy now. He was very involved with Stop the Steal in 2020. He sucks up to Elon Musk. He says he's going to, he makes vague threats against people that Musk doesn't like. This is the guy who threatened Chuck Schumer and Robert Garcia. And Garcia's fighting back, and Schumer, this is crazy stuff. And hang on.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And apparently, because Mike Johnson needs Mills's vote to give a tax cut to billionaires by gutting Medicaid, they're not going to arrest the guy.
Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the Strip and Flip Selection, as opposed to Election, of 2016, 5 Jim Crows and Electronic Election Theft, by Bob Fitrakis and Harvey Wasserman. This is from the chapter Part 1, page 15, Strip. The foundation of election theft is the manipulation of race as a divide and conquer strategy. It began with the first Jim Crow chattel slavery. Slavery in various forms has existed since the dawn of time, but in the colonies of British North America and then in the United States, it took on a uniquely virulent incarnation. Chattel slavery was, of course, a horrific, brutal labor system designed primarily in the American South to power a network of plantations that produced cotton, tobacco, indigo, rice, and other hot weather crops that could be grown in large fields. But it had a larger purpose here. Our peculiar institution, how the founders referred to slavery, was meant to divide black laborers from white in a caste system that would guarantee that they would never unite in rebellion. As we'll see, this originated with the infamous Bacon's Rebellion of 1675 in Virginia, in which indentured servants of both races joined forces. Plantation owners vowed to make sure that that never happened again. When the United States became an independent country, plantation owners also vowed to secure political benefits from their slaves. Thus, they wrote into the Constitution the 3/5 clause that gave slave owners additional representation for their slaves, even though those slaves could not vote. That additional vote count guaranteed that every president from Jefferson to Lincoln either owned slaves or his vice president did, and that the Congress was strongly controlled by slave owners right up to the outbreak of the Civil War.
After the Civil War, with formal slavery abolished, a Jim Crow system of racial segregation overtook the South. Enforced by the Democratic Party and its Ku Klux Klan terror wing, white landowners updated the realities of slavery to again keep blacks and whites apart. The roots of racism since 1865 has been the treatment of legally freed African Americans as something less than human, guaranteeing all whites a sense of superiority and an economic leg up. When the populist and socialist movements that campaigned most powerfully from the 1880s to the 1920s worked to overcome this separation, they were hammered by the court and electoral systems through a series of stolen elections and twisted race-based legal decisions, and the fusion of the Democratic and Republican parties in the 1917 municipal races in the Northeast. Confirmed by the Supreme Court in the 1890s, this updated Jim Crow caste system again guaranteed that blacks in the South and parts of the North would not be allowed to vote, and that they would be carefully divided from whites by caste as well as class. Since 1970, the primary weapon for suppressing the minority vote has been the third Jim Crow, the drug war. In the tradition of Bacon's Rebellion and the populist socialist upheavals, blacks and whites once again began to unite during the civil rights and anti-war movements of the 1950s and 60s. In response, Richard Nixon's Republican Party invoked the divide and conquer war on drugs. Confronted with the liberalization of the Southern Democratic Party, Nixon feared that black votes might remake America's political map. In Republican eyes, there was only one solution: disenfranchise the African American population, along with young and Latino voters who were leaning strongly to the left. In 1972, Nixon pointedly ignored a powerful report from his own Blue Ribbon Schaefer Commission on drug use and escalated the attack on marijuana and other drugs. In the 45 years since, a staggering 41 million Americans have been arrested for pot or other controlled substances. That's a number of human beings that exceeds the populations of more than 150 other countries worldwide. It has left the United States with the largest prison population in the history of the modern world, while having little or no impact on the actual use of drugs. As Michelle Alexander has shown in her landmark book, The New Jim Crow, the majority of those incarcerated have been black and Latino, with a devastating impact on our elections. Millions of these mostly young, mostly male citizens have been stripped of their right to vote, as well as their ability to maintain families, obtain work, and meaningfully participate in the political lives of their communities. All this has been by design. Once again, a new Jim Crow policy has been delegated by a ruling elite to strip our non-white population of its ability to exercise its fair share of power in our electoral process and to unite with whites in political action. In the 1890s, rising industrial interests committed the nation to a fourth Jim Crow, a course of race-based global empire. The U.S. already had a history of foreign intervention, dating to Thomas Jefferson's 1803 use of our fledgling Navy to fight pirates along the coast, the shores of Tripoli, of what's now called Libya. That was followed by the conquest of the North American continent with genocidal warfare used against the indigenous peoples who had lived here for 20,000 years. By the 1890s, when the frontier consumed, America's giant corporations began to expand overseas. They started with Hawaii, a constitutional monarchy, and then pushed into Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines, and beyond. And in all cases, these interventions involved the white-ruled U.S. interfering with the political systems of non-white countries. In discussing this fourth Jim Crow, we include an extensive, though not complete, list of these interventions. It underscores the reality that our own political system has become an imperial juggernaut, with the inevitable blowback bound to obliterate any residual pretense to real democracy at home. Generally, there's been an attempt to portray these interventions as benign, meant to bring democracy, progress, and the Christian faith to third world nations. In fact, they've been largely economic in purpose, a dollar democracy to grab other people's resources. The Strip and Flip selection of 2016 by Bob Petrakis and Harvey Wasserman.
Our daily song is now available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, Tidal, Deezer, iHeartRadio, and a whole bunch of other platforms. Just look for songs by Louise and Thom Hartmann. Check it out.
There's a shadow of the nation, a chill in the air. A leader rises claiming he'll repair. But the cracks in the foundation, they're part of his plan to dismantle the democracy we built by hand. He calls oppressed the enemy, rewrites the truth, turns allies into traitors, empowers the uncouth. Courts packed with loyalists, the rule of law bends. Will we watch in silence as our freedom ends? Do not obey in advance, don't fall in line. When the strong man calls, remember the signs. Question the orders, resist the dance. Save democracy, do not obey in advance. Women's rights under fire.
35 minutes past the hour. So fascinating piece over in The Guardian today. I'll pick up the calls in just a minute. I just want to share this story with you. They start out with a story of Meg. She's 60 years old. She's an office manager from Maryland. She says, I bought my home in a hurry in 2020. It was less expensive to take on a mortgage than to keep paying ever-increasing rents. But now housing costs consume 50%, literally half of her take-home pay. She said, I keep increasing the deductibles on the home insurance to try to keep the premiums down. They ratchet up every year while my income doesn't. Our necessities consume 75% of my income, with half of that, 50% of that, housing costs. And what's going on is that mortgage costs are up, right? I mean, mortgage rates right now, depending on your credit rating, are running 5 to 7% or more. Home insurance premiums are going through the ceiling all over the country, and particularly in areas that are hit by natural disasters, by climate change disasters, and then rising property taxes. And wages are not keeping track with any of this stuff. So, what do you do? Oh, and home equity interest rates are now at 11%. So what do you do with this? How do you prevent? I mean, the whole point of the article is that home ownership for many Americans has become a nightmare. This dream of, I'll buy a home and it'll increase in value faster than inflation, and I'll be able to sell it when I retire and, move into a cheap condo and have enough money to, live for the rest of my life and take a cruise and whatever. And it's just not working out that way. Also, just maintenance costs are going through the roof. Plumbers and electricians and, everybody and his brother is charging over $100 an hour just to show up. So what do you do? What should America do? This, probably I should write an op-ed about this at some length, but there's a bunch of things that I can think of that we can do. Number one, we should ban the ownership of residential single-family homes by hedge funds or corporations or billionaires or foreign investors, and just say homes are for people to live in. Number one. And number two, other countries are doing a whole lot of good stuff. Chile and Costa Rica offer grants to first-time home buyers. They actually subsidize the purchase of your first house. Mortgage guarantees, loans at preferential rates, and subsidies on interest, not just deductions, but subsidies on the interest paid on mortgage loans are all available in Croatia, Estonia, and Norway. Poland has a first apartment program that allows first-time buyers to open subsidized housing savings accounts with tax-exempt savings, sort of like we have with our health savings accounts. By the way, this is something that Kamala Harris had proposed, and she wanted to give first-time homebuyers $50,000. Remember this? This was a big deal. It was a serious proposal. At least 25 OECD countries, the wealthiest democracies, not including the United States, have laws to help over-indebted homeowners avoid foreclosure. These include subsidies for mortgage payments, payment of arrears, postponement of payments, refinancing mortgages, and mortgage-to-rent schemes. Down payment assistance. Some countries help with down payments to make home ownership more affordable, particularly for first-time buyers. And many democratic nations invest in public housing programs. And we did too at one time. I mean, public housing was a cornerstone of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. And in some ways it didn't work out, and in a lot of ways it worked out really well. I mean, you can condemn public housing all day long, and oh yeah, you're creating ghettos and all this kind of thing, but it's a hell of a lot better than the tent cities that we have right now, isn't it? I mean, isn't that, pretty straightforward stuff? So I think there are things we can do about the housing crisis in the United States. We are not without power and ability, and we should be getting about it. And Democrats should be talking about it more. And again, where the hell is Kamala Harris right now? She warned us over and over and over again as we were shoveling money at her that Trump was a fascist. Where is she now? So, picking up your calls, Susan in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Susan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thank you so much for taking my call. I'm a first-time caller.
Well, thank you.
This question may be a sort of a neither here nor there anymore, but it's something that nags at me, and I never hear an answer to it. So the $4 trillion that Musk is tasked with finding for the tax cuts, right, in order to make up for this bill or the act that is sunsetting this year. My understanding is all this hacking and slashing is to find the $4 trillion to pay for the
it's actually a little over $2. They want to raise the debt ceiling $4.5 trillion, and they want to give a $4.5 trillion tax cut to billionaires. But they're going to pay for part of it with new debt, and part of it by destroying Medicare and obviously they have Social Security and Medicaid in their sights as well. Not to mention all the slashing and burning that Elon's doing in D.C.
Right. Well, obviously, regardless, this is a huge amount of money. What did they do the first time to find the funding? I mean, this is pretty extraordinary, obviously. They're cutting and slashing this and that, agencies and departments and programs. What in the world did they do the first time to enact this? To
pay for the tax cuts? For Trump's tax cuts?
Yeah.
They didn't do anything. They ran up the national debt by, as I recall, $7.8 trillion. Donald Trump's increase in the national debt was the largest in the history of the United States in any four-year term, and was larger than any, even eight-year term Republicans. I think it's important to put this in context, Susan. When we came out of World War II, our national debt was at about 136% of GDP, which is roughly where it is right now. We're at 130% of GDP. We were deeply in debt when we came out of World War II. We had a 91% top income tax rate. We had a 55% top corporate income tax rate. And people actually paid their taxes. There were not a great number of loopholes. So from 1945, at the end of World War II, through the Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter administrations, we paid down that national debt all the way down to the point where when Ronald Reagan came into office, the national debt stood at $800 billion, 0.8 of $1 trillion, not even $1 trillion. So we were on, and you want to have some national debt because you've got to be able to issue treasuries because they stabilize marketplaces. In fact, the one time that we paid off the entire national debt, which was in 1836 during the administration of Andrew Jackson, it threw the United States into the deepest and longest depression in the history of our country. Because there was just no place you could safely put money, and the faith and confidence in the American economic system just collapsed, and in the dollar internationally. So we were down to $800 billion. Reagan put into place a series of two major tax cuts for billionaires and big corporations. He dropped the top tax rate. At that point, it was at 74%. LBJ had lowered it from 90% down to 74%, but he closed so many loopholes that he actually increased taxes on rich people. So Reagan cut that down to 25%, and then a year later had to raise it back up to 27%, and dropped the corporate tax rate down into the mid-30s. I forget exactly where it was, and that added so much debt to the United States that when Reagan left office in 1989, the national debt was $2.4 trillion. So he tripled the national debt. And then, of course, you had George W. Bush, who came in and added another $6 or $7 trillion to the national debt with two major tax cuts, and then another $6 trillion with two wars that he did not put on the books. Obama put those wars on the books, so it looked like Obama increased the national debt. But in fact, all he did was just acknowledge that we had spent this money on these wars and we had these ongoing obligations. And then Trump did it again. With another $7 trillion. So now we're $36 trillion in debt, and all of that debt, except for the first $800 billion, 0.8 of $1 trillion, is from Reagan, Trump, and Bush. 3 Republican presidents. That's it. So that's how we got here, Susan. And in fact, had Reagan and Trump and Bush never cut taxes, if we were still operating at a 74% income tax without the loopholes that have been added by Republicans since then, we not only could choose not to have any national debt at all, we could have a huge surplus. We could afford to have a national health care system. We could afford to give everybody in the country free college. But, you've got this handful of right-wing billionaires who don't want to pay their damn taxes, led by a handful of petro-billionaires. They're the moving and shaking force behind this, who have funded think tanks and right-wing radio stations and now 3 television networks, who are, convincing the average voter that, getting a $200 tax break is a really, really big deal, and therefore you should sign off on $7 trillion, or in this case, $4.5 trillion in tax breaks for billionaires. That's where we're at. That's how we got here. And it's just insane. Susan, I got to run, but thanks for the call. A great question. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
45 minutes past the hour. Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. And welcome back. Larry in Los Angeles. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Tom, let's say that a Democrat stepped forward and held one of those unofficial committee hearings.
That's actually happening right now.
Right now? Who?
I'm sorry, I don't recall. I'd have to look it up.
Oh.
But there is an unofficial hearing of some sort around one of these issues that's going on in Washington, D.C. And my apologies for not having the details at my fingertips. There's just so much news every day. It's starting to blow past me.
Much appreciated, Tom.
But they're doing it the way that John Lewis, or not John Lewis, John started with a C. It wasn't Cummings. The Democratic congressman who was holding the hearings on Medicare for All back, 15 years ago when I was doing this program. He was on our program regularly, an African American guy, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his last name, but he was holding those in a closet. It was a large closet. It was a storage area in the Capitol building because the Republicans wouldn't give him an actual meeting room, but he held hearings on Medicare for All. John Conyers was his name.
There you go. So, Tom, who would you like to see step forward to do that, and what issues would you like to see dealt with?
I'd like to see a dozen of them. I think there should be investigations into Musk, into Doge, into big balls, into Trump and his relationship to Putin. There's just a whole bunch of issues that really deserve congressional investigation, in my humble opinion.
Okay, terrific, Tom. Maybe one of your callers will remember who's holding that committee hearing at this time. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry. And I'll try to track it down today and this afternoon and come back with you tomorrow. Josh in Monroe, Wisconsin. Hey, Josh, what's on your mind today?
Hey. Real quick before I get to my point, I just wanted to point out something I found to be kind of funny. What is Elon Musk's favorite letter of the alphabet?
I don't know.
X. He's even named his kid X.
Oh, yeah.
He's had several businesses he named X. Yeah. Well, what just happens to be in the center of the swastika?
Oh, an X. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
right.
But I just wanted to point out, I don't know, it hasn't had much news, but I don't know if you saw Trump and Doge have their eyes on the Fort Knox gold. They say they want to audit it. They're not sure that it's really there.
Right. This is a right-wing conspiracy theory that's been running around for a while.
Yeah, well, just like every other right-wing conspiracy theory, I worry that they may use it to steal our gold. They have our citizens' bank accounts as well. They could cripple this country and you're the expert on this, but I believe even though our dollar's not backed on gold, that would tank the value of our dollar. And would that be their way to lead the world into using this BRICS currency?
I doubt it, and I don't think that the loss of the gold in Fort Knox would have any impact on the value of the dollar any longer. I'm not even sure why we're still keeping a strategic gold reserve, but we've got it. So I think it's just, it's kind of like an artifact, But Josh, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Stick around. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us.
He came down the escalator, smug and loud. Said it drained the swamp, but he fed the crowd. Lies like a flood, truth on the run. Turn the White House into a loaded gun. Fear and fury, that's his play. Set the match, then walks away. Burn it down and claim no blame, while the people pay for his twisted game. It's shock and awe, a wrecking ball. Break the law, deny it all. Tear it down, watch it fall, then beg for a curtain call. He's got the con, he's running the con.
Back 51 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Pedro in Corpus Christi, Texas. Hey, Pedro, what's up?
Tom, how you doing, sir?
I am great, but I'll get better, Pedro. How about you?
That's great to hear. I am doing excellent myself. Cheery, even though I know the country is in a downward spiral. I think about the Snoopy and the Sopwith camel, and when he gets shot and he starts going down, that's where I see the U.S. at right now.
There you go.
But anyway, I have a quick question. Do you remember when Matt Gaetz voted McCarthy out of the speakership?
Yeah, I remember it well.
Do you remember that rule?
Do I remember what?
Do you remember the rule? The rule that they used? There was a new rule that they had invented, right?
Yeah, that any one member could object to the speakership and call a vote, basically. Now it requires 7 members.
But it doesn't matter from what party, correct?
That's right.
Why don't the Democrats start doing stuff like that? Start creating chaos. Start getting in their business.
Yeah. You'd have to ask Hakeem Jeffries.
I saw him last night on that with Rachel Maddow, like you said earlier in the show, and oh my God, I was arguing back with the
guy is the biggest recipient of any member of Congress or any Democrat in Congress of AIPAC money. I'm so disappointed. I'm just so disappointed in this guy.
I was too. I was beside myself because he just kept talking and mentioning old talking points. Yeah. Absolutely nothing substantive about a pathway forward.
Yeah.
And I was really, really disappointed when I heard that. But boy, I would love to see the Democrats start throwing wrenches into their works. I mean, they have nothing to lose.
I agree. I think that if that was a strategy that might actually produce some benefit for the Democrats, that probably some of the, Jamie Raskin or Jasmine Crockett or AOC, would be talking about it. And they're not. So it's probably something that, might actually backfire. I don't know.
It may not. It may not, like you said, it may not prove anything or be productive, but it still took them off.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm all in favor of sand in the gears. Pedro, I got to run. Thanks for the call. Nancy in Oakland, Illinois. Hey, Nancy, what's up?
Well, I'm sitting here literally shaking, Tom. I used to listen to WCPT because it gave me hope and I felt good. I no longer feel that way. And when I hear people like you saying, I'm thoroughly disappointed, I am more than I am so far, you know, as angry as I am at the criminal cons, I am so 1,000% more angry at these Democrats. And they're working at deserving that nickname that the cons keep giving them, and they keep falling to these guys, and I am feeling like I am not represented. I have never been represented. They're following this broken two-party system, completely broken two-party system that they should have given up on years ago. Nothing's changed in 200 years. They still have a minority rule in this country. It's still a reactive government, not a proactive government. They have conceded and that not compromised, and that's the reason we have an undemocratic branch of the three-branch government. I am so fed up with this.
I think an awful lot of this, Nancy, started when...
They're doing nothing. They're doing nothing about it, and it's making me sick. And I am going to fight to my death for my country, but that's what it's going to come to. We are already in a civil war, and we will probably go to world war. Thanks to the Democrats not getting rid of this guy in the first place, and now the whole half of the government is all poisoned, and there's no way they're going to fight it back. And like you said, I get depressed now when I listen to radio. I've given up on TV because it's making me literally sick.
Yeah, I get it. Nancy, thank you for the call. I'm out of time here to respond, but thank you for the call. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. And I still think there's hope for democracy and for our democracy, as bad as it is. In fact, this might be exactly what we need to wake the hell up. So get out there, get active, tag you're at 5051 FIFTY.ONE and indivisible.org. Check them out. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow on the other side. I said that.
Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!